Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be part of this interesting conference, which raises topics whose centrality and relevance is undeniable. I would like to thank the organizers and the whole team for allowing us to meet during these days. I'm Tomas Errazuriz, co-founder of Cosas Maravillosas and associate professor of the Creative Campus at Andrés Bello University. So, Cosas Maravillosas, or one that we can translate as wonderful thing, is a collective that we formed together with anthropologists Ricardo Greene and Florencia Muñoz, and we seek to encourage sustainable living through research, recognition, and care of those things that make up the everyday environments, many of which are evident and we do not always notice them. We carry out various actions, projects, initiatives where we seek to creatively involve people and communities in practices such as reuse, repair, recovery, and conservation. We are sure that this is the most effective way to reduce consumption, waste, and carbon footprint, thus contributing to a better future. I would like to start with these images to which it is more and more difficult to remain indifferent. When we think about our future on the planet, the diagnosis is catastrophic and widely known. Today, it is undeniable that we are living through the worst environmental crisis in the history of mankind. The causes are multiple, but there is some agreement that among the main ones are our consumption habits and the predatory lifestyles they entail. An image that would have been unthinkable a few decades ago is now a common sight in many of our cities. The question it raises are many, linked to industry, quality of materials, obsolescence, etc. As researchers, we are especially interested in its previous trajectory in the home. How was its passage through the home and where was it kept? What care, maintenance, and repairs did it receive? At what point and for what reasons was it decided that it was junk? Could it have been used for something else? The question that summarizes our interest is, what is the consumer's responsibility for the durability of these objects? It is the users who ultimately determine the demand, decide the ways in which something is consumed, and determine the fate of things. Most research to date has focused on the practice of acquiring and discarding consumer goods. These are certainly fundamental actions, the change of which can have a high impact. However, this is not enough. From wonderful things, cosas maravillosas, we are interested in reflecting on practices that favor the conservation and increase the durability of our everyday objects. Specifically, we study the scope of care actions such as maintenance, storage, repair, and reuse of objects. In the following, I will briefly present some projects that we have been developing in order to narrow down the area of interest and the approach we have developed. And then I'm going to present the research project we are currently undergoing. One of our first projects was about the countless lives of newsprint. Based on fieldwork conducted in more than 50 homes, we documented and analyzed the multiple uses given to newsprint. Based on these, a series of topics of great interest for thinking about our relationship with everyday objects emerged. This project resulted in an article and an exhibition that we will be taking to Melbourne at the end of this year, hopefully. And from this project, we realized the importance and extension of these practices among the population, especially among older adults and people less connected to consumption networks. Therefore, we decided to undertake two new projects associated with these groups. On the one hand, we explored the relationship that people establish with objects in the rural world. That is, in environments where there are barriers to access to consumer goods, and on the other hand, the discard or disposal of goods is also limited because there are no garbage collection services. We saw how in these places objects are perceived as dynamic matter or raw material that is constantly intervened and adapted to everyday needs. The second project aimed to explore the age variable and specifically certain ethics of care that are very present among the elderly. For this, we worked in the homes of our grandparents, taking advantage of our privileged access the privileged access that grandchildren have. Our main interest was to answer a very simple question. Why do all the things in their homes, including food and medicines, tend to last longer than these same things in our homes? In parallel to these projects, we started a broad search for all kinds of forms of reuse and repurpose, both ordinary and extraordinary, and we were documenting them photographically while spreading them through an Instagram account. You can follow us. The Instagram account the name is Álbum de Chispezas. You can find it right there. This initiative has helped us to measure how widespread these practices are in various groups and activities, but also how most of them remain invisible and are not valued beyond the creativity involved. Simultaneously, we did fieldwork on households in different locations in Santiago, analyzing the importance and recurrence of these daily practices of care, reuse, and repurpose. From this material, we put together an exhibition and a catalogue where the objective was to position these practices as objects of desire and consumption. The call was to window shop and build a home from these old-style habits and solutions, now renewed in the light of sustainability. My favorite garment is a project currently in progress, where care becomes the fundamental variant. Faced with the voracity of a textile industry that encourages rapid use and discarding, we wanted to focus on those special garments that we care for and treasure for a long time, generating deep emotional bonds and undertaking actions that allow us to extend their lives. We asked more than 700 people to send us some photos of their most beloved garments and to tell us why they chose it. The results are fascinating, and we look forward to publishing them soon. All the projects have the common goal of recognizing daily actions that affect the durability of household objects. The results confirm that despite the fact that the economy of compulsive buying and discarding has become firmly established, these other forms of consumption persist among different groups. The consumption model that prevailed until a few decades ago, based on an ethic of care for things and resources, is still in place. Many Chilean houses continue to prioritize the maintenance, repair, storage, reuse, and recirculation of goods and avoid discarding them. Thus, these other, less harmful forms of consumption, although not predominant today, are still present in our homes and daily lives. The last project I would like to present, currently in progress, seeks to trace among a diverse population the relevance acquired by repair and reuse of objects in the domestic sphere. Specifically, it seeks to explore possible relationship between these actions and class, age, and spatial conditions of those who perform them. Additionally, we are interested in reflecting on the effective implications associated with these actions. In that sense, this project seeks to advance in the understanding of the subject-object relationship by exploring the ways in which the repair and reuse of objects strengthen or reconfigure affects and emotions. We believe that this approach offers the possibility of entering a critical terrain for the stability and durability of things in the home, and from there, for the strengthening of a more ethical and sustainable relationship with the world in which we live. We are doing research in 36 households, 12 in an upper-class neighborhood of Santiago, 12 in a lower-class neighborhood, and 12 in a rural area. In each of these areas, we are working with elderly and young people. In each of the homes, we are conducting a longitudinal study that includes in-depth interviews and an audiovisual walkthrough that allows us to configure a complete registry of repaired and to be repaired objects. These objects are followed longitudinally at 2 or 3 points in time, each separately by periods of approximately 4 months. While we had hope to be able to share with you some of the results, the pandemic has delayed the fieldwork and we're still in the middle of the data collection work. However, we do have some preliminary findings, especially on elderly households. The first thing I want to conclude is about ethics of care for things and resources. Regardless of class difference or living conditions, urban, rural, apartment or houses, we have identified an ethic of care for resources among the interviewed elderly. This ethic is based on daily conservation practices and is generally unrelated to sustainability and environmental concerns. Our second preliminary result is about the house and the things. Within the group of elderly people, the household tends to be a space that favors the stability and conservation of things. These spaces are generally larger, inhabited for a longer time, consolidated, where there are a series of routines and peoples that ensure the conservation of goods. There's no longer a need to set up a place, but rather to maintain or perhaps to dismantle. Conservation practices such as repair, restore, conservation are favored over acquisition or discarding. Then we have finally this trust in things. Partially due to the amount of time they have been around, there is a confidence in things and in their capacity to be useful either in their original form or in other forms they may take from their resignification. There is no shame in repairing, often the opposite, pride. There is no major questioning in this regard, but doing what has always been done by their parents, their grandparents, etc. Well, we have more results, but we have no time to talk about them. I will be happy to discuss them later if it's possible. I just want to thank you all for the time, for the attention, and let's talk. Thanks.
Children in the Liminal, the social life of adoptive care in Poland. I know that I was not an ideal mother. Anyhow, I do not know whether I was a mother at all. These words, spoken by a 37-year-old woman who was a part of a care setting, which I will call liminal, are a part of a personal story she told me in a framework of an ethnographic research project on adoption in Poland. Her name is Anna, and together with her husband, they were trying to conceive a child for 8 years using various methods, and eventually they decided on trying adoption. This is why I got to know Anna, because she had an experience of adopting, even if a short-lived and an incomplete one. This paper is built around her narrative and the liminal situation of care she described to me. I find the story to speak particularly strongly about the ways in which the liminal is produced through the relations of power, including the state power and the flawed infrastructures, and is characterized by risk, disorientation, and an uncomfortable uncertainty. I take Lisa Stevenson's broad definition of care as the way someone comes to matter and the corresponding ethics of attending to the other who matters. This broad definition is meant to shift associations with good intentions, positive outcomes, or sentimental responses to suffering. And to contain in this definition the ambivalence of our desires and the messiness of our attempts to care. Taking the title of this panel as a guiding point, I want to dwell a little on the more contemporary notion of liminality, in particular as it has been developed in queer and trans geographies. I need this category in order to unpack and acknowledge everyday forms of care that are practiced in contemporary Poland in relation to children disjoined from their first families by the court ruling. I want to speak to the precarious dimensions of liminality that children qualified for adoption can find themselves in. I chose one story, having in mind Kathleen Stewart's call to focus on a series of precisions, meaning the singularities of what circulated across everyday, across sociality, materiality, infrastructure, atmosphere, the political. The singularity, the specific series of precisions I will talk about, shall be read as events of a sociocultural world. Together with her husband, Anna found an adoption center in which they went through the selection process and then a training for adoptive parents. They thought of adopting one child up to 3 years of age. The employees of adoption center pressed on expanding their scope of possible, and eventually they agreed to be ready for 3 children up to 5 years of age. In 2 months, they got a proposal to adopt 3 siblings, 2 boys, age 3 and 4, and a girl, age 6. What do you know about the biological family? What kind of information did you receive? I know that the boys had different fathers, typical issues like alcohol, homelessness, and so on. We do not know what these fathers are. I guess there is no contact with the mother either. In general, they have other siblings who are older. The children offered to Anna for adoption were living in a foster family for most of their lives. Anna's story is a story of repeatedly ruptured care and disconnections. It is also a story about getting stuck in the liminal. Hence, this talk is about unsettling care and grappling with the non-innocent stories in which the politics of care as practiced in regards to children taken away from their first families become visible. The story foregrounds the clashes of care, the ambiguities of certain care settings, as well as it reveals the social life of care as messy and precarious. In particular, if seen from the perspective of children. Precision 1, the papers. We were quite terrified, but it turned out that the children were healthy. There were no deficits. Only the girl. Here the papers were not clean. She was officially recognized as disabled because of the mental illness, but in the papers it looked as if the carer simply wanted to have benefits out of the disability, so she had arranged for it. For a very long time, the adoption center did not qualify these children for adoption. The reasoning was that there are many, and additionally, there is a mental illness. Anna requested the adoption center to examine the girl again, and it turned out that this unknown mental illness was actually not there. Among other things, the first precision reveals how a mental illness diagnosis in a child and a number of siblings situates children in the liminal, makes them less prone to adoption, as they are less desired by the candidates for the adoptive parents who most typically dream of a newborn. Diagnostic papers stratify children and direct the efforts of the bureaucratized care. You may be in the scope of such care, or you may fall out of this scope, since the adoption centers are created to cater for the desires the families are coming with. But even diagnostic papers contain no certainty. Precision 2, time in the liminal. Since what age were the children in the foster family? The boys got there actually straight after birth from the hospital, and the girl, she got there when she was 2. It's long. Exactly, it's long. So in the adoption center, when we got to know their story, I asked, aren't we taking them away from their family simply? Oh, no, they replied. They are ready for adoption. In the Polish system, the foster care is thought of as a zone of transition. The care practice in this zone is imagined as temporary. According to the law, the foster care should not exceed 18 months. In reality, children in Poland stay in foster care for much over 3 years. As a paid vocation, foster care is imagined as labor done for money. Hence, foster carers are expected to easily detach from children they care for. During the research, the employees of the adoption centers often depicted those carers who have problems with detachment as unprofessional, as troublemakers destabilizing the system, as in need of more training. Due to the long amount of time children stay in the foster families, the liminality becomes routinized. A sense of connection and feelings developed by the foster carers and the children become a problem for the system in the society where adoption is imagined as the best solution and where the bureaucratic care cannot meet time frameworks set up by legal arrangements. Precision 3, call me mommy. They did not quite understood what a foster family was and that they are placed in the foster care. Like, what's the point that they're there and some adoptive parents will come? For instance, they were calling this carer an aunt, but they could say, for example, Aunt, you are my mommy. And she did not rectify it, despite that later on I asked her to. How long had you been going to this foster family? For 5 months. I was telling her straightforwardly what I wanted. You love them, but this is your job, and they are here with you temporarily. Why they will stay with us forever. So She didn't want to tell this to them. Only we gave them such information, but it was unclear to them. The sense of unclearness and situation of clash between the two types of carers, the foster carers and the adoptive parents-to-be, is what defines the situation of the three children. There is little work around children's competences done. The lack of knowledge is one of the factors which determine the liminal character of where they are, as well as their vulnerability. It blocks their individual potentiality for sense-making in this difficult terrain, filled with expectations, affects, and desires of adult carers. And there was the Mother's Day organized at the boys' kindergarten. They texted me with an invite. It took me a lot of effort to come, because in my work I travel a lot and I had a business travel schedule that I had to cancel. So I managed to change all those plans in order to be on that day. So I was really surprised when I saw the foster carer at this event that she also came. The desire of being attached to the children and the imagery of how a child should relate to a mother includes expectations of being the only mother. For the foster carer, it is the existent attachment that makes her expect that the children express what she also feels, importance and connection. Still, the cultural script says that the mother is only one, while one mother is also missing from this picture completely. Well, yes, but the children, they were torn. They almost lived in two houses because we were going there twice or 3 times a week. And later we also took them for the weekends. I think now that it was idiotic. And the coordinators of this adoption process, they did not push for closing this faster. Not at all. They did not talk at all. The liminality of this situation of a clash of care is tolerated by the bureaucratized care. They refrain from acting upon the sensitive terrain which they themselves arranged for. Precision 4, fragility of the material and emotional arrangements. I announced at work that I will take a maternity leave. We arranged the apartment for children. They had rooms, toys, clothes. Everything was ready. Note both desire and loss became ingrained in the private space. Yes, and during this meeting, they said, because this carer, she insisted on having more time, she claimed that transitory phase of contacts should be as long as possible so that the children are enabled to see for themselves. So at a certain point during this meeting, she said that they were thinking of adopting them. So everybody got frozen. They needed more time to think about it. We said we did not agree on more time, that we want this decision now, whether they want to adopt them or not, because they had enough time to think it through. It is interesting that the foster care statement of emotional attachment gains weight and attention only when they speak out the adoption scenario. This is what threatens the arrangement. The clash, the discordant efforts to care manifest themselves also in bodily reactions of children. It happened a few times that she hugged me, and a few times she called me mommy, but later she refused. At the beginning she was so cheerful, and later she was so sad. She was very tense and she was twitching, as if she did not know whom to choose, whom to be with. These descriptions reveal vulnerability, imbalance of power, and potential violence inherent in these practices of care. They also evoke a sense of placelessness related to the ways the bodies of these children are spotlighted and wanted to be cared for by the adults. We can see a spectrum of highly normative environments that people navigate every day. Attentive studies of everyday practices of care in a liminal care setting might highlight diverse manifestations of violence and power as structuring children's experiences. Adoption is a complex social phenomenon triggered by plethora of forms of aggression, violence, marginalization, disciplining, harassment, but also love, closeness, and attachment. For the 3 children Anna almost adopted, the liminal and the uncertainty got routinized, and the experience of attaching and separating got reiterated. Thank you.